At my brother's engagement party, he smirked and dragged me over to his boss. "This is Cassandra, the family failure," he announced loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. My parents nodded along their faces, twisted in discomfort. "Such an embarrassment," my mom muttered while my dad chuckled awkwardly. The room at the luxurious mountain lodge in Denver went dead silent. Snorts. Snow was falling softly outside the massive windows, but inside the air felt thick and heavy. His boss, a sharply dressed man in his late 50s, didn't laugh. He just stared at my brother, at my parents, then at me. When Parker said my name, Cassandra, the man paused for a split second, his eyes narrowing just enough that I caught it. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name, but it made my stomach twist. Then he smiled, slow and calm. "Interesting," he said quietly, turning to my brother. "Parker, I'll see you in my office tomorrow morning." No one knew what to say. My brother's grin faltered. I stood there frozen, the humiliation burning through me like fire. Minutes later, I made an excuse about a headache and slipped out into the cold night, driving home alone with my hands shaking on the wheel. If you've ever been treated like the black sheep by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Stick around because this story gets insane. The next morning, I sat alone in my small house on the outskirts of Denver, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Sleep had not come at all. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Parker's smirk and the silence that followed his words played on repeat. I had been labeled the family failure for as long as I could remember. At 41, I owned and ran my own independent financial consulting firm from a modest office downtown. My specialty was corporate turnarounds, pulling mid-sized businesses back from the brink of collapse. The work was not glamorous. No one threw parties for quiet debt restructurings or discreet vendor negotiations, but it paid the bills. And over the past decade, I had built a reputation among owners who needed help without headlines. Clients trusted me because I delivered results quietly and effectively. My family never acknowledged any of it. To them, success meant visible titles, big offices, constant praise, and social media posts. Parker, 5 years younger, had always been the star, the one with the easy charm, the marketing role at a growing logistics company, the fiancé from a good family. My parents doted on him endlessly. Every promotion, every new car, every vacation photo was framed and celebrated. My achievements received polite nods at best, usually followed by a sigh about how I should settle down or find something more conventional. 3 months before the engagement party, Parker had called me out of the blue. "Sis, I need a favor," he said. Voice light, as if he were asking for a ride to the airport. "Savannah and I are planning this thing at the mountain lodge, and I'm swamped at work. You're good at the boring stuff, right? Could you handle a few vendor contracts?" I should have refused, but he was my brother, and despite everything, that still carried weight. So, I agreed to help a little. It started small, reviewing quotes from caterers and florists. Then I spotted serious problems. One contract Parker had already signed with the main event coordinator contained a clause that could have left him exposed to massive penalties if timing or deliveries went wrong. It was careless, the kind of error that could easily lead to a lawsuit if the vendor decided to enforce it. I spent 3 late nights on the phone renegotiating, getting the risky language removed, and securing better payment terms. Parker never asked what I had changed. He just said thanks and moved on. Then came the deposits. 2 weeks before the event, the photographer and the live band both sent reminders payments were overdue and they were preparing to cancel. Parker had forgotten amid some work deadline. If those bookings fell through, the entire party would collapse. No professional photos for the big announcement. No music for the dances Savannah had planned so carefully. The lodge had strict rules. No refunds on the venue if key vendors pulled out. I wired the deposits myself. $8,000 for the photographer, another $6,000 for the band. I used money from a recent client retainer, telling myself I would sort it out later. Parker promised to pay me back immediately. "You're a lifesaver, Cass," he texted. The money never arrived. I kept working. The florist tried to add nearly $4,000 in premium charges that were not in the original bid. I caught it, called them directly, and forced a corrected invoice. The catering company quoted inflated rates for bar services. I negotiated them down by 20% after showing competitors' pricing. Every fix was done quietly from my home office late at night or early morning, so it would not interfere with my real clients. Parker never knew how close the whole event came to disaster. To him, everything simply worked out. At the lodge, he stood accepting compliments on how perfectly organized it all was, how professional the setup looked. Savannah smiled beside him, thanking him for making her vision come true. Snorts. And then, in front of everyone, he dragged me forward and called me the family failure. If I had not stepped in, if I had not corrected his mistakes, covered his oversights, negotiated his bad deals, that party would not have happened the way it did. No photos, no music, possibly no venue at all. He would have looked incompetent in front of Savannah's family, his colleagues, and his future in-laws. But no one knew. Not Mom, not Dad, not Parker. Snorts. They saw the smooth event and gave him all the credit. They saw me sitting quietly and assumed I had contributed nothing as always. I had spent years proving them wrong in my own way, building a business that helped real companies survive real crisis. Yet in their eyes, I remained the disappointment. The one who never married, never boasted, never demanded attention. That morning, alone in my quiet kitchen, the weight of it pressed harder than ever. I had fixed everything for him again, and he had repaid me by humiliating me in front of a room full of people. For the first time, I seriously asked myself why I kept doing it. Why I kept protecting someone who never once protected me. I stared at the cold coffee and realized something cold and clear. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I did not belong. Tuesday the following week, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside my small office in downtown Denver. I looked out from my desk and saw a man in his late 50s step out dressed in a sharp navy suit carrying a leather portfolio. Theodore Ramsey walked straight into the building without calling ahead. My assistant had not arrived yet, so I met him at the reception area myself. He took a moment to look around the space-simple desk, organized filing cabinets, a few framed credentials and client testimonials on the wall with clear respect in his eyes. Then he faced me directly, his expression serious yet approachable. "Miles," he said, offering a firm handshake. "Do you have time for a conversation?" I nodded, surprised, but curious about why Parker's boss would show up unannounced. I guided him to the small conference table in the corner of the room. He sat down across from me, placed the portfolio on the table, and started without small talk. That evening at the Mountain Lodge, he said, voice even and measured, "When your brother introduced you and mentioned your name, Cassandra, I did not connect it immediately. But the way you stood there completely calm, no outward reaction, no attempt to defend yourself, it triggered something." On the drive home afterward, it all came back. He paused briefly, gauging my response. I remained silent, letting him continue. 15 years ago, I owned and operated a mid-sized logistics company based right here in Colorado. We had overexpanded, taken on heavy loans for new warehouses, signed unfavorable long-term contracts, and cash flow was disappearing fast. Bankruptcy filings were less than 2 months away. My father had died the previous year, leaving me the business in a vulnerable state, and I was on the verge of losing everything he had worked for. The details started coming back to me. It had been early in my career, one of the first projects I handled completely on my own. After going independent at 26, determined to establish my name in turnaround consulting, a young consultant contacted me directly. Theodore went on. No mutual connection, no discussion of fees up front. She spent weeks reviewing the full books at no charge, identifying every area where money was leaking, poorly negotiated freight routes, overpaid vendor agreements, hidden penalties in loan terms. She delivered a precise restructuring plan, prioritize creditor renegotiations, liquidate underperforming assets, cut operational redundancies without massive layoffs. He opened the portfolio and carefully slid an old report across the table. The cover page read, Cassandra Miles, independent financial consultant, in the same clean format I still use today. Concise bullets, logical flow, no unnecessary wording. I've kept this all these years. He admitted, because you turned the company around without billing a single hour. When I insisted on paying you after implementation began showing results, you turned it down. You said you were just starting your practice and could not accept payment from someone facing genuine crisis. Your approach reminded me of my own drive when I was younger, focused, unflinching, no need for recognition. I looked at the faded pages. Memories surfaced of endless evenings analyzing spreadsheets, making cold calls to suppliers, drafting letters to banks for extensions. Ramsey Logistics, I said softly, connecting the dots fully. You consolidated routes and sold the excess fleet. He confirmed with a nod. Sold it at a profit 3 years later, used those funds to invest wisely and grow sustainably. The larger operation I lead today traces directly back to your intervention. My entire career trajectory changed because of that unpaid assistance from a stranger who saw potential where I only saw collapse. He leaned in slightly. At the party, I recognized the same steady gaze of the person who helped me without expecting gratitude or acknowledgement. The quiet composure under pressure. The exact professional style in that old report matches everything about you. I was speechless for a moment. That project had been meaningful to me at the time, but clients moved on, and I had buried it among hundreds of others since. No one had ever brought it up again, let alone thanked me years later. Why come here now? I asked, genuinely wanting to know. He closed the portfolio gently. Because hearing how your own family described you did not match the person I knew had saved my business. The consultant who rescued me without fanfare is not a failure. And since Parker reports to me, I've been paying closer attention to certain patterns at work. He stopped there, not expanding further yet. The implication hung in the air, but he shifted to asking about my current practice instead. I described recent cases rescuing a family-owned distribution firm from foreclosure, guiding a regional supplier through supply chain disruptions. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that showed real understanding of the field. We spoke for nearly an hour. The morning sunlight moved across the office walls as he shared brief updates on how the company had evolved since my involvement. New divisions, steady growth, community contributions. It felt strange but validating to have someone outside my family circle recognize the impact of my work. When he finally stood to leave, he extended his hand again. I'd value keeping in contact Ms. Miles properly this time. I walked him out. As the SUV pulled away, a small shift settled inside me. Someone had seen the value I brought, not through boasts or demands, but through results that lasted. During that initial meeting and the several phone calls and in-person follow-ups that followed over the next few days, Theodore Ramsey shifted the conversation to the real reason he had sought me out beyond the past connection. He explained that he had quietly initiated an internal audit at his logistics company approximately 10 months earlier, prompted by discrepancies in financial reporting that crossed departments. Parker had come under scrutiny early in the process. Theodore presented the evidence in a calm, organized manner, laying out printed reports, email chains, and annotated spreadsheets on the conference table. The most significant issue involved a high V-value contract with a national retail chain for optimized shipping and distribution logistics. The project had been publicly credited to Parker as his personal initiative. He had delivered the final presentation, accepted the congratulations from senior leadership, and received a substantial performance bonus along with a promotion recommendation. In reality, the core work had been performed by a junior analyst named Nathan Hayes. Nathan had spent 6 months researching market data, building financial models, and drafting the initial proposal. Parker had joined the team only in the final 2 months, then systematically took over credit. Email records showed him directing team members to send all updates through him personally. He then forwarded those updates to executives with slight rephrasings, presenting them as his own ideas. The commission tied to the deal amounted to $47,000, plus the added visibility that accelerated his career trajectory. That was only the beginning. Theodore opened another folder containing 18 months of expense reports. Parker had routinely submitted personal expenditures as legitimate business costs. A weekend trip to Las Vegas was documented as client development meetings with potential partners. A luxury hotel stay in Miami was labeled networking event coordination. High-end clothing purchases, suits, shoes. Accessories were categorized as professional attire required for executive presentations. Even some preparatory costs for his engagement party, such as catering tastings and venue scouting visits, had been quietly billed to the company account. The total fraudulent charges exceeded $110,000. The pattern had started small minor reimbursements that slipped through and gradually grew bolder as no immediate questions arose. Theodore's forensic accounting team had cross-referenced every item against personal credit card statements, calendar entries, and travel itineraries. The mismatches were undeniable. I sat listening, a mix of disbelief and grim recognition settling in. Parker had always been quick to take shortcuts when it benefited him. Seeing the documented trail made the behavior impossible to dismiss as mere oversight. Why share this with me specifically?